Hey, Cam followers, back to the norm. Thursday evenings, Cam Facebook Lives. Welcome to 2022. This is going to be an epic year. There are so many plans afoot. Please meet the lovely Andrew Hale. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him at least 2 occasions now. I think it might be 3 because I came on yours and you came on mine. It's going to be great. We've already had a little bit of a planning stage, so I really do hope you enjoy tonight. It's very informal. It is not a webinar. It is a chat. And the aim of these Facebook Lives is to talk about things that there's confusion, there's loss of confidence, so that we can all help each other out, because some of you might be owners, some of you might be therapists, some of you might be dog trainers, behaviorists, etc. So please do join in. If you've got questions, pose them. We'll try and get to them. Before that, please meet Andrew, epic dude, and a Cam advisor. Oh yeah. So we've got 16 epic world-class advisors now joined Cam, and Andrew is one of them. So please, Andrew, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, hi, Hannah, and Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to everybody there. Just so you know, I've got my puppy. I've mentioned this before, I know, but if I keep looking over my shoulder, I'm checking in on puppy. All right, so I'm not being rude.
That's fine.
Well, I'm a certified animal behaviourist here in the UK. I've got a human psychology background, and that's really important because for me, I talk and educate a lot on the notion of the emotional experience. And I think it's something that's really important, and it definitely connects to what we do with CAMS, and looking at how we can become more available to the emotional care and support needs of the dogs, and also for my clients, of course, because I think when you're a caregiver for a dog who struggles with challenges, whether they're behavioral or whether they're medical or clinical, caregiver burden is caregiver burden. It doesn't matter whether it's for a child or a relative or a dog. So I think we have to recognize both ends of these, and that's why I like to talk in terms of the emotional experience. We were saying off air that part of that is quite subjective and very abstract, because the two things about the emotional experience, one is we do all have one, including our dogs, and secondly, they're all unique and individual to us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we can be a little bit wary to go down that subjective path.
Veterinary professionals, 100%. It's a difficult area, massively.
But I think it's something we should embrace and not be scared of, because understanding the subjective nature of it is part of it. You know, I wouldn't dream to presume of your outlook or your emotional experience, Hannah, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't be available to try and find it out. Yes. It's very easy to not be available. And that's kind of the part of the topic we're looking at tonight, of course, looking at obedience and the kind of the arbitrary view of looking at a dog regarding what they should or shouldn't do based on what we ask them.
Yes. So we're going to crack on with that. And we had about 20 minutes trying to plan, and we realized that both of us, we just want it to flow. So we've got a mild structure, but we've got so much content, it is going to bounce around a little bit like a ping pong machine, isn't it? First of all, I have to do this because CAM is self-funded initiative, guys. We support ourselves, and this is one of the ways that we support this organization, providing you with these tools and resources. This is a book. It is called Why Don't You Listen, and it is designed for children to educate adults, which is what I absolutely love about this, is how amazing would it be that you're reading this book to a child or a friend or a family members, reading it to their child, and they're actually educating themselves as well as their child. It is beautifully illustrated. It is available in the CAM shop. You can buy it single or you can buy it in bulk. My dream is for any dog that is suspected of having pain, this should go to the family household, because in my lifetime as a vet for the last 20 years, I have put a number of dogs to sleep, a large number of dogs to sleep, that I now look back and think, actually, do you know what? I think that could have been avoided. But unfortunately, the dog has been put in a position where they've actually had to do something to get the family to listen, and the family have lost faith and trust in that animal, and therefore they've either been rehomed or they've been euthanized. So please come on, support Cam. Go to the shop, buy it singly or buy it in bulk. You will really be supporting your clients, yourself, and Cam. Right, I'm not very good at marketing. I hope that was good enough. Let's crack on. Now,
yeah, but one point on that though, that book is so supportive of our topic today, because some of those dogs that you a lot of this kind of narrative, a lot of what we're going to discuss tonight is about our perception of the behavior of another, our perception of what that behavior should or shouldn't be, and definitely dogs who are struggling, either kind of with anxieties or with pain related aspects, who are just really struggling, and they're struggling to communicate their care and support needs. If the caregiver's perception is of them doing something or not doing something, and then seeing them then as a disobedient, bad or naughty dog, we end up with this breakdown in communication, and that's what happens. And then we end up with some of those situations you're talking about, where the dog simply has to take that ultimate sanction that is available to them, which is using their mouths potentially.
Yeah. I'm a little bit tearful. Sorry, I've just seen so many lovely people saying hello, Andy, and hello. It's January.
Hello, everybody.
Brilliant way to start the year. So please say hello. Yeah. Tell us where you're from. This is really cool. Never, ever in my dreams did I think Cam would grow this big. So thank you. Tell us where you're from. First of all, we're going to try and define pain and obedience. So I'm going to talk about pain. I'm just going to talk about some International Association for the Study of Pain definitions. You're going to kind of try and define obedience so that people know where we're going to start from tonight. So I'm just going to read to you guys a definition, which I think is going to blow your marbles, because Andrew was just like, wow, there is so much in that. So this is the definition. It's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. So please remember, there's actual tissue trauma or there's potential tissue trauma. So the fear of an event that could cause pain and harm. Key things to remember: pain is always a personal experience, and it's influenced to varying degrees by biological, psychological, and social factors. We have to remember pain and nociception are completely different phenomena. So nociception is your physiological processing of this material, but pain is your perception that can be influenced by previous experiences. So your previous life experiences and your learnings can influence your concept of the pain you're experiencing. A person's report on pain should always be respected. Their pain experience is their pain experience. And we shouldn't be there going, oh, man up. Oh, come on, grow a pair. Pain usually serves as an adaptive role, but we do know that there is maladaptive pain. So it seems to serve no purpose. And this is a beautiful thing right at the end. Verbal description is only one of several behaviors to express pain. Inability to communicate does not negate the possibility that a human or a non-human animal experiences pain. Now, when I read that to you earlier, you were like, oh, God, that is potent. Yeah. Still like it?
I love it. And I think this is some of the stuff we talked about in our little preamble about the notion of the emotional experience and how unique and individual it is to us. And that includes our processing of connection to an acknowledgement of pain. And of course, we're talking predominantly physical pain, but there's all sorts of pain, emotional pain, other kinds of pain. Some people celebrate pain, of course. Some people these crazy people who run for fun. I don't know whether you're one of those, but I'd sooner miss a bus than run for it. But anyway, that notion of going through that, feeling the burn and all that kind of thing, that it can be a celebrated thing. It's not always necessarily a thing that's telling us new things, but I think, and also that notion of it's not just the physical sensation now, it's the anticipation of it again. Mm-hmm. And that kind of the defensiveness that comes with that. And I think that's a big area for when we start thinking about dogs. But also this thing about all attempts to communicate pain should be respected. I love that. It's so beautiful. And one last thing on that as well is that, and this fits with behavior actually, this notion that a lack of behavior somehow denotes a lack of an emotional response, trauma, or physical pain, I think that's a really important thing to recognize, because, obvious pain is obvious, and it does something to us psychologically, actually. So if you fell off, I don't know, if you fell off your bike and you're like, oh God, my back's really hurting, that probably wouldn't chime with people around you. If you fell off your bike and your leg was at a kind of a 90-degree right angle to what it should be, that would viscerally do something to them. So that's like, oh my God, yeah, you must be in pain, therefore. So actually, there's only a small percentage of those injuries that will necessarily kick in that visceral response by others. A lot of the time they will be, oh, you'll be okay, get up, whatever else. There's lots of different reasons.
Can I tell you an anecdotal story? I've told this before. It's by Dr. Tracy's team. So she studies pain, and she uses functional MRI to do it. I think she's at Oxford University. Kathy knows her. Kathy knows everybody. And she took loving couples, and she put the female of the couple in the functional MRI and burnt the finger and watched the brain activity. And then she put that out, and she put the man of the loving relationship into the functional MRI and burnt his finger, watched the brain pattern, took him out, put the lady into the functional MRI, burnt the husband, and she had the same functional MRI pattern. Took her out, put the man in, burnt the lady in front of the man, nothing. So as you say, being able to interpret and respect someone else's pain experience is very variable as well, isn't it? We have different capacities to interpret somebody else's experiences.
And actually, that's a really good point. We won't go into that now because it's a big topic. But when we think about how our brains develop that worldview that we've discussed before, you and I, based on all sorts of things, we end up having a quick thinking, a kind of appraising brain that just makes those quick thinking assumptions and judgments. To truly be available to the emotional truth of another, it's quite hard, actually, because there's a lot we have to do. I use my cake analogy, as you know: compassion, awareness, knowledge, and empathy, because we need to bring that to truly make me think, right, how can I be available to what Hannah's experiencing right now?
Say that again. I like that. Say it again.
Compassion, awareness, knowledge, and empathy, which rather cleverly makes cake, because we all love cake, right? So why not bring cake?
Yes.
So this is important for us, and I think one thing we're going to be talking about in a little while is the importance of trying to go through. When I talk about obedience in a moment, obedience really fits into a quick thinking view, this kind of notion of being able to control other without necessarily waiting for feedback from other about whether that's even doable, let alone whether it's right to kind of ask it in the first place. Of course, these are quite profound philosophical stuff tonight for a Thursday evening in a cold January night.
Let's go there. Let's talk about obedience, because I think there's I'm not a behaviorist. I'm not a trainer. So I have a huge amount of respect for you, Andrew, and I'll probably use the wrong terminology. And I want to make this clear now. One of the things that inhibits conversations is fear of not using the right terminology in a very rapidly changing field, which is what you guys are in. Vet medicine's changing all the time. We worry about saying something that's a little bit out of date. And in your world, terminology can really make or break a conversation, especially with colleagues that are really kind of like, maybe saying, battling for airspace. So I put my yellow card up now. I probably will on occasion use the wrong terminology because it's not my field of expertise. So I apologize now. But let's clarify what we're talking about obedience. And I want to keep it in the context for the majority of our audience who are owners. But there are dog trainers, dog walkers, all the canine professionals here as well. But what are we going to try and talk about with regards to obedience? What do you mean?
So I'm going to do what you did. I'm just going to get up a quick definition of obedience, right? Because it gives a framework, right? So we can start from there. And by the way, I say a lot of the wrong stuff a lot of the time as well. I just blame my kind of dyslexic brain on that one, Hannah. But actually, for me,
say Cam's okay. I'm trying to get involved in the party. I'm going to say something. Sorry if it's a bit wrong. So all you guys that are canine professionals that feel a bit inhibited, like I often do, just take a deep breath. Say it anyway.
And to be honest, I think quite often we can hide behind that kind of vocabulary, and it's much better just to kind of kind of feel things. And even if we can't necessarily frame them in the right terminology, I think the most important thing is to have felt it in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. And also another big tip, guys, any of you that are professionals that are thinking, right, what like little glimmers can I get from this? Find your tribe. I had a lovely lady, Michelle Broadhurst. Please go and listen to her live. We talked about myofascial pain. And after that, she was like, you're in my tribe now. We can talk to each other as friends. You know, if you use the wrong terminology, don't worry about it. You know, we're looking after each other. We've got each other's back. So find your tribe.
That's always a good point. And of course, CAM's a good place because we're all the family here as well. So that's good. Yeah. So obedience, right? According to our friend Google, right? Just quickly put it in. Obedience, compliance with an order, request, or law or submission to another's authority. That's obedience. And of course, it comes to this notion, I think, I'm just going to go on a bit of a waffle now, just to kind of frame a few things, because I think it's important. So we have for a long time seen dogs as being, especially because of the dominance model, which is still very much heavily there in the zeitgeist, this notion that we somehow have to have a position of authority and therefore the dog has to do as they're told. And if that balance is kind of upset somehow, that there'll be a problem. And that's where behavioral challenges come from dogs. We won't go into all that now, but of course we know that that's been kind of discredited for a while. But from that and supported by that is this notion of when we are going to do some training with the dog, the object is that dog will end up being able to give those behaviors on cue or command, and they will do them every time, 100%. And then we end up building expectations and judgments around that, which is, well, I expect that. This is what I expect a dog to do. This is my worldview. And those expectations and judgments really start to drive then what we are perceiving about that animal's very essence as a dog. So because then if the dog doesn't do that, we then start to counteract that with terminology and language like, so this dog's being disobedient, this dog is bad, this dog is naughty, this dog is willful, this dog is ignorant, this dog is stubborn. We go through all these kind of things. But this is very normal. It's not just how we interact with dogs, by the way. This is very much part of the human condition, how we judge others. And I've said this many times before when we've spoken, as a species, we love to judge and we hate to be judged. And when I say love to be judged, that's a bit of a casual framing of it. But what it means is because our brain doesn't like to have to cognitively reappraise all the time, it creates that worldview. It creates a belief system and a value system by which we take on the information around us. That's our perception. That's our attitude. And then we will judge the world around us based upon that point of view. What we were talking about a moment ago about being truly available to the emotional and care and support needs of another. The reason that can be difficult is because we have to bypass first and navigate our own judgment and expectations and our own biases. That's why it can be tricky sometimes. So when we start thinking about obedience, the reason this is such an important topic tonight is because we have to recognize that, and this isn't about an argument about training, not training. It's not about that at all. It's about recognizing the doggedness, a good little turn of phrase there for us, considering the topic. But anyway, the kind of doggedness that can come from expecting obedience. There is huge potential fallout there because of the dog's ability or not to be able to comply. Or to be able to act, or to be able to do that thing. Now, it can be because quite often I use my doors of the brain analogy. This is my kind of nice little quick way of thinking about the complicated things that our friend Kathy Murphy talks about, which she blows circuits in my brain every time I speak to Kathy. Bless her. Yeah. So if you something nice and simple, then if you imagine the dog's brain has lots of little doors in it. Same applies to us, actually. We need as many of those doors open for that dog to have a chance of calmly, safely, rationally process what's going on. What we're going to recognize is what we're asking them to do through training is only one bit that brain's actually trying to process. There's multiple things going on through multi-sensory integration. Something else that Kathy talks about. She's got a great graphic actually on her Barking Brains site about sensory integration. So that's just one aspect of it. But so if we're going to stand a chance of getting the dog to learn what we're doing, we need to try and keep as many of those doors open as possible. But pain and stress are big door closers. They just are. I had relatively mild toothache before Christmas. It wasn't off the chart, but I just couldn't process. I didn't have enough doors open now. That niggling kind of niggly pain thing. So yeah, pain.
Oh, can I do my personal experience? And one of the things that actually drove Cam to existence was at the young age of around about 33. I had something called supraspinatus tendinopathy, which is a tendon pain where it runs through a certain channel in your shoulder. That in the background there'd be this low ache. It was sometimes there, it was sometimes louder. It would be like silent, loud, and then it could turn into scream in an instant. And it went on for a few weeks, if not months. And I'd be at work and I just couldn't get into my case notes. I'd try and write up a consult, but I'd be a bit distracted. I'd be trying to hold a conversation, and I wouldn't be taking the history like I normally do. You wouldn't be, grabbing all of those bits of information, and totally cognitively challenged during that time. So I think we really need to respect that others feel this too. And if in pain, you are likely to be, as Andrew said, some of your doors are closed.
And when we experience those kind of, even the niggles, we can often seek relief. And I talk about relief a lot, as you know, because I think it's a really important concept that we think about with a lot of behaviors, that they're actually relief seeking. And especially we have to be mindful of that when dog training, because if we, again, this whole thing about judgments and expectations, if we have in an arbitrary way decided that behavior is unacceptable, that behavior is bad or naughty, and we're just going to think about changing that behavior using, for example, positive reinforcement, great. Are we giving the dog the relief they might have been seeking from the previous behavior? Or are we just getting them to do something else instead that we find more appropriate? And this is really important, especially so we can seek that relief. So if you've got a bit of a niggle, like when I had my bit of tooth thingy going on before I managed to see the dentist, I was able to take some pain relief. I was able to kind of rest a little bit. I was able to block off my diary a little bit. Dogs don't have that agency necessarily. And definitely not if we don't listen to them. If we're not listening to some of those signals. And actually, if you've got a dog who is normally pretty good at listening to stuff, and when you ask them to do it, they'll do it, and then suddenly they're not, that could be a sign that actually there could be something else going on for the dog. If we jump straight in to think, well, my dog's suddenly become disobedient, as though that's the issue, then we're missing some potentially really important information or feedback from the dog. And this is a big thing for me. We've got to be careful about what we're saying, because for me, anything I ask a dog, and this is going to be a bit controversial for some, but it's what I believe, and I will support it with some words. Everything we ask a dog is a request, in my opinion. We can call it a command. This notion of 100%, in my opinion, there is no such thing as 100%. All training potentially could fail. I worked with in support of the parts of the military in my early psychology career, where the men and women were highly trained, but stress and anxiety will potentially have the potential of meaning that training might fail. The same for a dog. We get sold a lot of stuff about 100% because it makes good marketing. Get that 100% recall, get 100% this, get 100% that. Yeah. So it is actually a request. And actually, when we start seeing it as a request, it allows us in that moment to get some feedback. I'm thinking, right, do I need to change how I approach this from a learning point of view because my student isn't getting it today? Bearing in mind that Rover tomorrow might be in a different mood, might be in a different place, might be in a better place to learn. Also, for me to think, should I be asking this anyway? Because sometimes, I ask stuff for my own dog. Sometimes I think, well, that's more about me and my ego actually than actually what you need to do. I get the whole thing about recall, because I know people say, well, look, surely recall has to be 100%. But again, if we have to kind of couple that with thinking about the environments where our dogs are off leash in the first place. I wouldn't want to have my dogs off leash next to a motorway and just hope that my recall would work if they saw a deer the other side or whatever else. It's just getting that balance right, for sure.
No, absolutely. And I think this is a really good point for us to just go through. We chose 4 things because we're dealing with a very mixed audience. So I'm very proud to say that CAM bridges huge gaps. Hopefully we've got veterinary professionals, we've got canine behaviourists, trainers, walkers, we've got therapists, we've got owners. So this is a broad audience. So we were trying to just trigger the brain cells, make people go, oh, that relates to me, or I've seen that. 4 things that we commonly hear people having difficulties with, that we go, oh, have you checked out? There could be something behind this. And we chose sitting, recall, pulling on the lead, and ball chasing, just because we felt that that would actually, that's not the definitive. There's hundreds and hundreds of things that we could talk about, but they grab people. They're things that are regularly talked about on forums and online, and people seek help for. My dog won't come back, blah, 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 blah. So shall we just kind of talk through the first one, because I think we can actually hang in there a little bit, sitting and holding a sit, because that is something that's taught a lot in obedience classes or puppy classes, or it's one of those underlying, please get your dog to do this for safety reasons, maybe as well. Go for it.
Okay, so sitting. So there's a big discussion going on within my community at the moment about the usefulness of sit, even, and why we necessarily see that as being the primary default behavior that we have with those expectations. And I think some dogs find it very difficult to sit. It's physically, especially some breeds, as we know. When we think about that dog who might be in pain or discomfort, for example, then the sitting itself could be quite detrimental to them. Or, this is what you mentioned, the holding of the sit. So I had this not so long ago, actually. I was out with a client. We were doing other bits and pieces. She asked the dog to sit. The dog wouldn't sit. The dog got up. And she told her dog off. And she said she used that as an example to me of how her dog has become increasingly disobedient. Now, this is quite a recent case for me, but we're already going through the clinical team looking at physiology, because there are lots of signs. I have a physiological checklist that I have with my clients that I can evidence-based back to. I've shared it with you actually in a.
Well, I guess it's a chance to say that we're working on further resources together. Huh?
Yeah. Further, we must talk about the further resources in a mo. So this is important. So this is the thing about being blinded by obedience. It's not the principle in the first place. It's just, if we're so in mind, hang on, the dog must do it, and the dog must not stop doing it until I tell them. We've got to recognize the challenges for them. Now, that's physical, but there's also mental, the processing. I talk a lot about adolescent dogs, as does our friend Sarah Fisher, of course, and as does Kathy, indeed. So there's lots of aspects there, physiologically, neurologically, about the kind of dysfunctionality and the dysregulated element of adolescence in a dog. And actually getting some of these dogs who are really buzzing, right? They're buzzing, to just sit and hold a sit, as though it's some way that we're going to help them to cope better. Quite often we're doing the opposite. We're increasing frustration in these dogs. We're creating all sorts of tension within that physiology, which can then lead on to discomfort. And so there's a lot of things to consider here around sitting, and especially in our case, thinking about pain and discomfort. And going through adolescence, again, we know about how much that physiology is changing all the time, and how painful adolescence is, those growth spurts and all that kind of thing that's happening. So this comes back again to us asking our dog to sit. If they don't, wonder why they're not able to sit, and not jumping to the conclusion that they're somehow a bad or disobedient dog. Have they got enough doors open right now? Are they not listening to what I'm saying because they're already triggered by the traffic, or they're already pumped up by something else that's happened, or is it because physically they can't? And this is the really important thing about us discussing obedience tonight, is recognizing that when we ask things of dogs, sometimes they might not physically or mentally be able to do what it is we ask them. And they shouldn't be demonized for it.
No, and I see it a lot. I saw it today with someone trying to get their dog to sit on the weighing scales, and they kept pushing on the back end. Come on, sit. And they're pulling the collar up, and they're pushing on the back end. Come on, sit, because they want that 3-4 seconds where they can get an accurate weight. And you're like, It's okay, he can stand. You know, there are reasons why he's choosing not to, and we should listen to that. But we also hear when people.
I was just going to pick on that because I love what you just said there, Hannah. I love that. I'm going to steal that as an example because it's a brilliant example. The notion of the weighing scale and the sit, right, is a really good example. Every time I'm in my the vets that I go and see and do kind of clinics and that within the pre-term thing, you just see everybody lining up to try and get their dog to sit on the scales.
Yeah.
Well, the scale's like 1.5 meters long by like 0.5 meter wide, right? So you can get the measurement by the dog standing, but we're so ingrained with this notion of the dog must sit. The fact the dog is already in the vet clinic is a tick for many of these dogs. The fact that they're not having a complete meltdown is a tick. The fact that you've got them onto a stationary object like this is already a tick. There's all these wins going on. And then we make a fail at the end by looking for the sit. So I think that's a great example. Sorry, Hannah, I just thought I'd pick up on that.
Wow, just natural, you see. I didn't even see it. But it's just something that I see and I hear. And like what's really lovely is CAM's become quite a good centre for people discussing either successes or frustration. So if any of you guys are listening going, oh, this is lovely, I feel alone, I want to work more with people that talk like this, I'm a canine professional, I'm a dog groomer, I did listen to the person that said don't forget dog groomers. We don't. CAM Advocate Level 1, there is a Facebook group at the end of it full of people that have done the course that now support each other in their wins, in their frustrations. And regularly people say, I've just seen a case, and you know, I feel so much warmth for the fact that I've been able to impart to that owner that their dog's disobedience, their laziness, their inability to fulfill our requests is actually pain related. That owner's stopped asking of that dog and putting them in that situation of anxiety and distress. Win! And then everybody's like, yay, good, go you. So if you're one of those people and you're looking for a place that you can actually share your experiences, successes, failures, frustrations, CAM Advocate, place for you. So yes, sitting.
So back onto that point there, because I think anybody who's heard me talk or do my own kind of education stuff will know that part of the driver for what I talk about is about trying to shift people away from a purely task-orientated approach to more of a care-orientated approach. It doesn't mean if you have a task-oriented approach you don't care, but if your main objective is to do the task, the care aspect can easily fall away. And that's the same whether you're a groomer, a vet, a caregiver, a trainer. And the thing about obedience is it is heavily weighted in the element of a task-orientated approach. The task is you will sit. You will do as you're told. You will obey me. And we've got so used to getting into that mindset. Now, we've challenged some of those norms in other areas of society. So we've still got a way to go, I know, but our attitude towards women within society, which was, again, back in the day, very heavily based on obedience. You will do as you're told. You will act in a way that I, as invariably the man, want you to act. The same with children. This notion of children should be seen and not heard. Now, that was being said as a kind of a trope even when I was growing up back in the 70s. It wasn't that long ago. But when you think about it, it's hugely corrosive, that whole notion that somehow a child shouldn't be heard, their needs shouldn't be heard, their ability to try and communicate an emotional need shouldn't be heard. And we're still stuck in some of that with some of the narratives and language around obedience and
I want to butt in here because one of the things that we pride ourselves, both me and Andrew, is that we don't lay blame on people. And I want to just go back to the dog on the scales. The lady was requesting that the dog sat to not impress me, but to complete my request of her. I asked her to weigh her dog. She had a concept in her head that the dog needed to sit on the scales. She became frustrated because I'm there waiting as the professional to see her dog, to look after the dog. She felt embarrassed that her dog didn't do. She therefore became a little bit more animated, a bit more forceful in her request. I don't lay blame on that owner at all.
This is the thing. Like we've said quite a bit even tonight, a lot of this is part of the human condition. When we're in that task-orientated process, we our brain wants us to see it through. And this whole process of talking about this is about what I call supported awareness. Very few people are deliberately cruel or abusive. The vast majority are just unaware. They're unaware of what that tool might be. This is why we can, we see people using tools that and the tools themselves have quite strong names to them, like a shock collar or a choke chain. The thing that gets them pushing through that title is because they're in a task-oriented mindset, because they're unaware of the other side of that side of things. And this definitely isn't about blame. We all do stuff all the time, and this is why we discussed at the beginning, being truly available to the emotional care and support needs of another is difficult, because we're in our quick thinking brain, and we also feel under a huge amount of pressure, a huge amount of external judgment about what we should be doing. We feel guilt is a big one. Of course, we've discussed guilt before, and guilt is something that often comes after having heard these kind of discussions. But what I would like to say about guilt, this is something I talk about. I think we need to celebrate guilt. We need to see guilt as being a sign of learning.
Yes.
It's a very visceral feeling that we think, well, actually, do you know what? I feel a bit guilty now because I did used to ask that of my dog, and now maybe they were in pain, or I do ask that of my dog, and I know they've got different things. Celebrate that feeling, because it's just recognizing I've learned something.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to your cake. So we promised ourselves in these lives that we were always going to give tools. So I always respect one of my amazing tutors in veterinary medicine was Dr. Andrew. Bloody name's gone out of my mind for a moment. Anyway, I worked with him in Brighton. He said, do not come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And my solution for you guys in the cake analogy, empathy, when I have owners that suddenly recoil. So we've got a lady, her dog's on the scales, she's been asking it to sit. I step and say, look, honestly, it's okay. He's possibly in discomfort, and that's why he's avoiding that. And then they immediately, you can see them recoil with, oh, God, I'm bad. I always say, don't worry, we all do this. I've made the same mistake. So please do not let it upset you. Let's move forward. Come on. Do not let people feel guilty. Yes, they can learn from it, but empathize and step forward with them so you can move on in your consultation and your time together. So please empathize. Blah, blah, blah,
That's
blah.
why these safe spaces like now are really important. I've just launched a new workshop called Unpacking the Emotional Experience, which is going to be for small numbers of people to have these discussions, because there's a bigger picture here, which is the fact that most of us have been kind of heavily influenced by a structured educational system, a conformist one that is actually based upon the notion of right and wrong, good and bad, punishment and reward. So we're heavily influenced by that as a species, and there's lots of reasons for that, and they're important ones, because we need social cohesion, social decency, the rule of law. A lot of aspects there are there. But when we start thinking about truly being available to the emotional care and support needs of another, we have to navigate some of these things that are there for all of us. I say and do the wrong thing for my husband and my dogs all the time. That might be a shocker, because I'm supposed to know better. Am I? I'm still a human being. I still have a bucket that fills myself sometimes. I still have moments when my doors are closed, and so it's hard, right? Being a caregiver, it just is, like we discussed before. And that's why I'm really excited about this, what we're talking about now, just trying to kind of shine a light on the notion of obedience, what it really means. Because I think we're inviting people to step back and think, yeah, actually, I can see how that could be the problematic element. But one thing I want to add in here, it's also important. It's okay me reading that little thing from Google about the definition of obedience. Everybody will have their own view of it. And I worked with a lady, and it was really interesting, because I worked with her not so long ago. And on the history form and also our first chat, she kept using the term obedience and discipline. I expect my dog to be obedient, and I expect discipline. And when we started having a discussion, and this is where cake comes in, because I brought cake, because it's easy to get your back up and you think, oh, let me know what you're talking about. When I actually spoke to her and we unpacked that, what she meant was she wanted to keep her dogs safe.
Yes. Yes.
Really important, right? So it doesn't mean just because somebody uses these kind of terminology that somehow they're some kind of dictator and that's how their mindset is. Actually, a lot of people look at this thing. They want a dog who is well trained. They want a dog who is obedient, who has discipline, because ultimately they want to keep them safe. And this is why I educate a lot about shifting people from a task-orientated mindset to have more of an underpinning of the care-orientated, because we all care. And we all want that best for our dog. And it's the task-oriented thing sometimes that can stop us from seeing those care needs, because that's the psychology, that's the nature of it.
Yeah, no, agree. And it's just triggered an emotion, a memory. And I hope, again, it's another like support topic that we've spoken about. Sometimes the person that you're talking to finds it difficult to go into a caring, emotional kind of portrayal of themselves. So it might make people cry, sorry, but Christmas Eve was pretty daunting down here because a local farmer brought in his dog. His young 9-month-old collie had run in front of a tractor wheel, and he came in. He was a burly man, and he was straight-faced, and the dog, you know, was really stoic, beautiful collie, covered in mud and stuff. And he lifted, and the dog was like, "Woo!" Unfortunately, the dog's spine had been snapped, and it was a no-go. And the guy came to collect, and you could see he was trying to maintain his composure, but he had completely become a vacuum inside. And we have to remember people's ability to talk. He would have talked about discipline and obedience. That would have been his terminology, his vocabulary. But it doesn't actually mean, as you say, that is why it's not an arrogance and a showboat thing. It's what is going to keep his dogs safe to enable them to work together. So yes, I love the fact that you said dig a little bit deeper into why people use these words and whether they actually mean something a bit different to that person.
Two things I just want to talk about that. First of all, that is a really good example of what you guys in the veterinary profession have to deal with on a daily basis, right? And I think we've discussed this before in some of our other chats, and especially the work we've done over on the CAMS Pro is with some of those chats. I think the next person that sees you on that day, who might be thinking, you know, who might not be feeling that they're getting whatever it is they think they should be accessing at that moment, have no idea what you've just dealt with. This is the reality of just being available sometimes. And there's a bigger picture here with that story of how difficult we've made it, especially for certain members of our society, to be able to feel safe to communicate emotional need. It's a big thing. And I think what I find when I work with my clients is I always have a one-to-one with my clients over Zoom, which I can do now before I've even met the dog, to get their side of these things, to give them that safe space. I have a lot longer, obviously, than you would have in that clinic, especially in that moment, because he will be in an emotional state. This is the point. But I think the most important thing, I gave a talk recently and somebody said, I really want to leave every client when that first session with something that they find reinforcing. And I said to them, maybe the language is wrong there. Maybe because if you're trying to think what they might think is reinforcing, you're probably not going to get there. And you're going to end up doing something that you think is going to make it look like you're a good trainer. If you really want to leave them with something positive, make them feel heard. Right. Make them feel heard. And that includes the language they might use. And it might be a language that you feel uncomfortable with, and all that kind of thing. And this is the thing about bringing cake. It's a good place to start. And it's amazing. I think I said to you before about a gentleman that I worked with who used to hit his dog with the lead when the dog used to have a barking response to other dogs, hit the dog with a lead. When we worked through this, and he was a burly guy, he was a blokey bloke. And once you sow some of these seeds and you allow that safe space, you hold that space for people to sort of evaluate. Remember, supported awareness is what we're talking about here. He actually then said to me, I think it was the first or second session after, do you know what? I realize why I hit my dog now, or I have done. It's not because I'm deliberately punishing them. It's because I feel angry and embarrassed. And that was really important for him to process that and unpack that and see that.
I'm going to lay myself totally open here. I think we all experience this. In the past, you know, walking in a park, like I'm very lapsadaisical. Luna's perfect. I don't ever have to reprimand her or do anything. I keep telling Andrew I'm the worst dog trainer in the world ever because she just came pre-programmed and beautiful. But on the very, very rare occasion that she might do something, which actually hard to recollect, the presence of other people in that park are expecting you to do something. So say you had a dog and they ran up to another person's dog and was that other person or that group of people or those observers are expecting you, and for you to fit in that societal situation, to not be heavy-handed, but to be authoritarian, to control the situation, to remedy it. And that's hard, isn't it? That's really weird. And I've seen myself, even with what I know, go, no, come on, we're going this way. And you're like, actually, the dog was just communicating with them. I didn't need to be verbally firm at all. But yeah, I just wanted to say
things on that as well, though, because a slight reframing of that is we have a perception that they think that we should do something, because of course we don't know what they think or what they presume. But you're absolutely right. We have a perception that societal norm of looking at kind of appropriate and inappropriate behavior and the consequences thereof puts a lot of pressure on us. And I think this is why we have fallen into this notion that somehow a well-trained dog is the answer. Now, obviously, a well-trained dog can help in many ways, but it doesn't guarantee that a dog's ability to cope. And it doesn't necessarily bear witness to that dog's individual personality and needs. And I think training for me personally is about building a vocabulary so that I can better communicate, but also me taking my role of being able to be aware of and manage environments so that I don't put my dogs into situations that either are going to be too much for them or anything I do ask of them is likely to fail. I think it's just getting that balance. We've been kind of sold this notion that somehow if you go to training classes and you get that obedient dog, that everything else falls into place. If only it was that easy. It just isn't. I think it's untruthful, actually. I don't think that is the truth. And it definitely doesn't bear witness to the truth of the animal necessarily.
No, I agree. So let's just, before we step into my request of tonight, was to talk about experiences that I have as a vet professional with the concept of highlighting there could be a pain component in the case in front of me. Let's just whiz through situations involving obedience or performing requests that we place upon them, that if a dog doesn't meet that request, we should encourage people to go, think outside the box. Is there something else going on? So we've had the sitting, the recall, the pulling on the lead. Play with that one a little bit, because that's kind of a very different behavior to sitting, stationary, calm, listening, 100% attention, pulling on the lead. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is a biggie for me. And I know it's for many of my colleagues as well, because pulling on the lead is invariably multifactorial for the dog, in my experience. Pulling on the lead is a really good example of something that traditionally we see as a go-to obedience problem. So we must get that dog to walk on a loose leash. We must do everything we can to address, this is that task-oriented thing, to get that dog to not pull. But why is the dog pulling in the first place? And virtually exclusively, actually, of dogs that I work with, I don't do training as such. Obviously, there's a training component to what I do with behavior, but invariably these dogs who have other issues, other sensitivities, included in that list is they pull on the lead. And quite often it's because they have generalized anxiety in the environment, or they're triggered by the traffic, or that nervous system is over-engaged, because there is that kind of somatic response, which is really hard. If you sat there now, Hannah, and you thought, oh, where's my purse, or where's my phone, or whatever it is that you hold value, even though we're live on air now, you're going to start feeling really uncomfortable, because every bit of your body wants to move to try and find it, to see relief. The same if you feel uncomfortable, the same if you feel triggered by something. It's really hard. We've all been in situations socially where suddenly the environment feels a bit uncomfortable and we really want to leave, and that's where we climb out the toilet window or something in the back of the pub. You've all been there, right? So that's the point. It's hard not to. No different. So, and actually asking the dog to do things pulling wise in an obedient style way, that dog potentially hasn't got enough doors open anyway to know what you're doing. So this is why in the village hall, the dog's walking nicely on the lead, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as they walk out the door, they're dragging the owner down the road and they're trying all the things, but the dog's emotional state is getting in the way. And Sarah Fisher, the wonderful, amazing Sarah Fisher, who's gifted us with so much good observational and thought-provoking things to think about, talks a lot about pulling on the lead and about whether there is a relation to pain there. Because, you know, if that dog has, especially some of the things I work with a lot with a great physio colleague of mine, Kate Davey, who looks a lot at things like sciatic issues and compressed nerves and that kind of stuff. When you get a triggering event for that dog anyway, so even something from the environment that gets that nervous system going, and you get that tension, that kind of creates that cyclic information that goes on and all the other kind of pain and discomfort that happens, that dog's pulling away, right? They're just pulling away because of that thing. So this is another thing as well that, again, with many dogs that I've worked with where there's been a physiological component, when that has been addressed and there's been some relief, the majority of that pulling is gone because they can relax in the environment now. They can process it. They can take on stuff. You know, that bucket.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I'm just reading a couple of the comments because it's that's what I hope to do by us just kind of stepping to another common complaint. People go, oh yeah. But for me, in a very two-dimensional fashion, and leads nicely tangent into what I want to talk about next. What I want to talk about, Andrew, is that just because they physically can doesn't mean that there therefore can't be pain. And we face this day in, day out in practice. And I gave you a really good example of something that happens to me all the time. I've sat there and I've been giving them the observations and the postures, movements, and the coat changes and things that they've told me that my pain's gone, that could be pain related, that could be pain related, that could be pain related. And then they go out to the car park, COVID times, we walk out with them, the dog jumps straight in the back of the car. You're like, right, brilliant. So that now makes me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. But people have to remember that in that situation, in that context, that resource of getting into that car was more important than the pain that dog might feel or will feel. And having that conversation in a car park, in addition to the half hour I've just spent with them in the practice, it's hard. So any of you guys who are pain practitioners, if you're veterinarians, veterinary nurses, if you talk about pain in your line of work and that happens, I feel your pain because it's so frustrating. And it's a common problem in practice. We have many people approach Cam saying, I am a dog trainer, I am a massage therapist, I am a canine professional of some kind. I believe this dog's in pain. They've gone to the vet and the vet can't see what I see. What the vet sees is one part. What the owner sees with the vet is another part to be considered as well. So just bear that in mind.
And I think this is the thing. I think there are three truths that we have to think about when we're kind of unpacking. Really, there is the dog's perception of the things, there is the owner's perception of things, and there is the professional's perception of things. And if we are more available to each other's perceptions and truths, we'll find that middle ground where we can build from. I think it's very easy to dismiss the kind of testimony of another. I think that's what you're talking there about the dog jumping the car. It's very similar, of course, with balls.
Yes.
This is one of the big common ones, because I might say to my client, I'm not an expert on these things at all, but I've learned enough just to think, well, actually, I think we need to use my physiological checklist and we can get it back to the clinical team and evidence base, because that's really important. And most of my vet colleagues really value that, because I spend hours with that dog potentially. They might only get 10 minutes. So if they've got a nice list of stuff, what I love about the physiological checklist, of course, is that I've given those core things to think about, but it's the caregiver who actually decides whether they're relevant or not. So it's a nice way of bringing that together. But they might say, well, yeah, but they can't be in pain because it's playing ball all day. Look at the way it's running around. And we forget how heavily we condition dogs to do stuff. Whether that's engage in sports, chase after balls, do all the cute things that they do, like rolling over and giving a paw and all that kind of stuff, because that's just what they do. And that can easily cut through the physiological barriers that they might have regarding these things. And And I think it's really important that we recognise.
Can I share my anecdotal story? I love anecdotal stories. It's so non-scientific.
So, that's what we're embracing tonight, because remember, we should embrace the subjective. That's important.
Yes. So I was going to do a practice training up in Yorkshire. By the way, guys, Cam does practice trainings. If you work in a vet practice anywhere in the globe now, we are able to provide practice training for receptionists, nurses, and vets. So you can all work together and create your OA 18. So I was doing a practice training in Yorkshire, and I was chatting to the chief honcho by phone, and talking about my need to give practice staff the confidence to talk about lifestyle changes, because you could have a dog and you can put them on all the medication in the world, the supplements, you can do all the surgeries you like. If that dog is still going to fall down the back steps, chase a ball, run up and down the stairs, slide across the living room laminated floor, you're never going to get the response that you want, and you're going to lose your owner's confidence. The money's going to be wasted. So many negativities of not embracing environmental and lifestyle change. And he said, yeah, well, I kind of get it through my own mistake. He had a dog who loved the ball all the time. He'd go out and he'd just keep kicking it. And he knew his dog was arthritic, not only in digits, carpi, elbows. But he couldn't see that his dog had a problem because he loved it so much. And when he went on holiday, the dog went to stay with his mum, who was unable to kick it. She had hip replacements. That wasn't something that she could offer that dog. So for 2 weeks, the dog did not chase the ball. And when he came back, the dog was so much better, moving better, posture better, more engaged, more energetic. And he was like, oh. And he'd been a vet for 30 odd years. So that's a lovely little anecdotal story of, we all make mistakes, but it's so blinking logical, isn't it?
It is, and this comes back to that notion of relief. That's why I like educating about relief, in this case, physical relief, because, we all get aches and pains. We all get kind of pulls and strains. It's just everyday life. As I say, we can sit down and we can take some paracetamol. Our dogs are quite often stuck in a kind of Groundhog Day of the same routine every day. We're going to go to the park. We're going to chase the ball. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they're just stuck in it. And it's hard for them to get relief. And when they actually get that relief, it can make huge changes to them physiologically and emotionally and psychologically. And it is difficult because there is a perception that supports this, which is, but they love it. They really love it. And I got a lady she's not a client, actually. She's somebody I know just personally, and her dog's really overweight. And the dog's really struggling, and she's like, she's 10 years old now, whatever it is, and I can't deprive her from stuff. I'd sooner just kind of have what she likes. And I didn't challenge that, but I think because there's love there, and there's wanting to be nice, without really stepping back and thinking, but actually, if I reduce stuff a bit, the dog probably wouldn't know, but they're probably being a lot of relief. They get more relief, and they might live longer, and all these other things.
About a resource that we have an email series for people that are trying to encourage weight loss. So I know that there are some times where whatever hat I wear, whichever way I choose to communicate, it ain't going to work. I can be posh Hannah, I can be common Hannah, I can be sat on the floor Hannah, I can be hold your hand Hannah. Ain't going to go through because that person is not engaged. So I now sign them up to an email series. It's 6 emails. And I just say, look, I really, really want to be able to help you, but I'm going to let you kind of take on board the information in your own time, in your own space, in your own way. Let me sign you up. It's 1 email a day for 6 days, and it takes people on a weight learning journey. It gives them the tools to do it on their own, or invites them to come and partake with a veterinary professional to do so. But I just think we have to remember, you can't force people, because it will cause them to push back. Do remember, we have different lines of communication. You can send people to the website. You can do the email series. You can do one of the CAM Essentials courses. And practices, guys. Remember that vets, we have a white coat effect. Often reception and vets and vet nurses are actually better at having these conversations. We know that they listen more. Look, I'm talking. All I'm doing is talking. I'm not listening. Vets have a terrible habit of doing this because we have to fit huge amount of information very short period of time. So we have forgotten the ability to learn and listen, not learn, listen. So make use of your practice team. So yeah, there you go, Andrew. Got a landing page you can send it to.
Yeah, well, I think it's important. This is why CAM is so amazing, of course, because of the different access points to information, and ultimately we're talking about stepping back a little bit. There's a great saying, which is the dogs are waiting. They're waiting for us to sort it out, and we're trying to be available to the truth of another species here, right? Let alone another person. So the days of just kind of one discipline having the answers out the window, right? It takes a supportive team. I see very much the clinical team as being the hub of the wheel. And that includes groomers, includes dog trainers and dog walkers. Nobody is just, I hear some of my grooming friends say, "Oh, I'm just a groomer." You're not just a groomer. Many dogs will see a groomer more than they'll see a trainer or a walker or a vet.
Would it be amazing if we proved that cutting the fur back and keeping the nails short is as powerful as a non-steroidal? Wouldn't that be mind-blowing? Yeah. Mind-blowing.
And also, a lot of groomers now, of course, are looking to get more education, so they can actually say to caregivers, "Actually, do you know what, Rover really struggled to stand today," or these kind of things. And the more information, the more that we can use this, especially with the kind of information that's within the CAMS hub. And of course, we've got. You and I have spoke off air, of course, about the exciting new developments that are coming up, because obviously, as advisors, we're all kind of going to be contributing to that bigger picture. It's such a great way to be able to gift this information so that people can start to reflect. Remember that saying of supported awareness. We're all on that journey of supported awareness. We all are. Nobody is truly an expert, really. We're all kind of just trying to be a thing. But the big thing I would say, we're talking about solutions and actually giving kind of tools for people. I think bearing in mind our communication to our dogs, it's a two-way thing for me, because learning about body language and stress signals and how dogs communicate is one side of the coin. How we train is the other, because actually what we are doing through training and the way we communicate. Hello, Hollyball.
I love it. And that might be a... You're not finished yet.
Could be. I apologise for the whinging behind me. This is Harley, who had his little ear procedure this afternoon.
Right.
Who's coming around now from his sedation and stuff with all his... Well, yes. So the other side of that is actually how the dog is perceiving how we communicate with them. Always remember that. We're learning how they communicate with us. They're learning how we communicate with them. And part of that communication is them thinking, okay, let me think about it. And does it feel right for me? And does this feel appropriate for me? And that's important. We shouldn't dismiss that. Again, this notion of obedience somehow overrides that maybe the dog isn't comfortable doing that right now, or isn't physically able to do that right now.
Yeah, but you're right. And I love something that Matt, I think it's Matt, you've touched on me. I love this.
I'm back.
The jumping in and out of the car thing. I've wanted to do a kind of like a satire video about all these things that are used in marketing to convey perfect dog ownership. And they sit like that, they jump in the back of the car like that, they wait at the side of the road in a perfect sit like that. And there's this kind of glossy video image of dog ownership. And him pointing out about jumping in the back of the car, it's almost like a bit of a status symbol. Here you go, my dog just jumps in the car. And yeah, I really like the idea that you are allowed to pause, whereas we're trained to train them to do it quickly. Whereas we don't actually give them a chance to say, yeah, I'll do it. I want to, but I'm just going to do it a little bit more carefully today because I hurt myself yesterday. I've got a bit of delayed onset muscle soreness because I went a bit silly with a tennis ball. We don't allow them to. So, yeah, let's all slow down and become like doggy hippies. Peace, man.
Doggy hippies. I like that. And I think it's giving that chance, that moment for feedback.
Yeah.
Because even if you're training, even if you are saying, Joe, I'm going to teach you something, we need to give the student chance to give us some feedback.
Yeah.
And one thing that we miss out a lot on is the concept of mood. We talk about emotions a lot and feelings and all that kind of stuff, but mood is really instrumental in how available we are to the life around us sometimes. Whether we can truly turn up to training today will be dependent on our mood, right? And our physicality is a big component of mood. Nothing worse than feeling tired or achy or uncomfortable to really affect mood.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can't turn up then in the same way.
You can't turn up. We did tonight. We turned up. I love chatting with you, Andy. I really love it, and everybody does as well, because we've had beautiful messages. We've already hit over an hour, so I'm just going to go back. There was one specifically. Andy, can you share your physiological checklist? It's going to be available soon, Lucy, because one of the things that Cam is doing, which I'm really excited about, is that we've got our 16 world-class expert advisors from very different disciplines. We've got nutrition, we've got human psychology and dog training, we've got surgery, we've got internal medicine, we've got independent biopharmacist. Incredible. And they're all hugely humble people that want to hear from each other. So we're going to make the most amazing soup in Cam. It's going to be brilliant. And I was talking to James Hunt, who's one of our advisors, and we're even thinking about creating an annual event where it's bringing this really, truly multidisciplinary understanding about musculoskeletal chronic pain management. Wow, it's going to be incredible. So yes, it will be available in some format soon. Somebody right at the beginning asked a question about fibromyalgia. Now, it's not a recognized condition, but many therapists and people in this field of myofascial pain do believe, but it isn't a classified thing. They've had dogs that have shown extreme presentations of myofascial discomfort. So yes, it's certainly possible. And what I would advise to you is to go and find a therapist that can take you on a journey. Sam Lindley would be somebody I'd really like to talk to more about this. Dr. Michelle Broadhurst is another person. But there are people out there that will understand you choosing to use that terminology, but it isn't, as far as I'm aware, a recognized condition. All the comments we've had tonight have been absolutely beautiful, and I just want to say thank you. It's Cam keeps going because of people like you, and yes, wonderful, you Cam followers, you beautiful people. I'm going to quickly just shout about the kids book again, because some of the people that are here now that might have not been at the beginning. Cam is a financially independent, a veterinary-led organisation. We support ourselves, and we do it by selling products like this. This is a beautifully illustrated book. The lovely Phil Ivans did it for free because we helped him with his dog with arthritis. It took about 2 years to come to completion. It is based on my dog Holly, who is forever immortalized. Oh, I didn't tell you, I finally scattered her ashes this Boxing Day. 2 years I've hung on to her, dragging her around the country with me. But finally, in the sea at Bude, as the sun went down, I said my final goodbye, but she's still with me. So Holly is still immortalized in things like this. It's available to buy from the camonlineshop.com. You can buy it singly, or we'd really encourage you to buy in bulk so that you can hopefully market it onto your own client base. Andrew, what have you got left to say?
Well, just thanks for having me along again. I love this space, and I love we've known each other a while now, I know, but it's nice just to have to unpack stuff and talk about things, especially in a very end user point of view, really, because this isn't about huge academic kind of debate or discussion. It's just about, like I say, trying to be working out the best way that we can be more supportive of each other, including our dogs, I think. And if people want to hear more of this kind of discussion, in as far as the kind of an environment like that, I've got my dog-centered care group on Facebook, where you and I had our chat, which is on there along with others. But that whole group is very much about thinking about what's more. It's not a case of replacing stuff. It's just what looking at what more means. So it's not about saying that the kind of traditional training we should get rid of. It's a case of what else is there? What more is there to consider? Taking
time and reflecting what you already do. Congratulate yourself and kind of have a deeper look of why you do it, in what way, what more information can you get out of it. For me, a massive take home, which I say a lot, is teaching your clients, helping your clients to be objective is so useful to us veterinary professionals. I think on a daily basis, I am saying to owners and to other professionals, let's get some objectivity so we can trace what is working, what isn't working. You're very subjective. You're very emotional about your dog. I spoke to a nurse today who's put a dog on Amantadine, and she's like, well, I don't think it's working. I've been on it 3 weeks and I don't see it's working. I'm like, right. Have you traced your objective measures? Have you used some kind of monitoring where you can take your emotional state out and watch? She's like, no, I haven't. Good starting place. So being objective, taking good videos, taking good photos, using some of the resources that are available, please do it. It'll make our lives a lot easier.
I think there's two important things there. One is this thing about having good evidence-based way of communicating with the clinical team, so it cuts through a lot of the stuff. And then definitely from my point of view, data collection is everything. Seeing that dog over 7-day cycles, finding a data collection format that is easy enough for the caregiver to do, but that makes sense to the clinical team. I think that there's a role for all of us in that, in making sure that we can have that moving forwards, because I talk about the subjective a lot, which is important when we think about the emotional experience, but the actual measuring of progress has to be quantified somehow. There has to be a way of thinking, is this dog, visibly different to how it was a week ago in different ways, or is this dog presenting differently? It's important.
Yeah, and I feel strongly that will support not only the welfare of the dog, but the welfare of yourself as well. So we have to remember the caregiver placebo is massive, and none of us want to be thinking our dog is better when actually they're consistently the same or they're deteriorating. But also for me, I can remember how emotionally I was involved with Holly and not being able to see the wood for the trees stressed the hell out of me. And actually being able to take it into an objective state gave me a lot of relief. So you will be helping your owners as well. So on that note, we're going to call it a day. Thank you, Andy. As always, love talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. It's a pleasure. Guys, please say your thank yous. Tell us where you've been listening from. Spread the word. Cam is going large this year. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.